as I mentioned last night, my name is Katie Hartfiel. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I'm a stay-at-home mom, and this is like my side thing that I get to do that I love so much. But I have two daughters that I get to hang out with all day, and their names are Maria and Claire. Maria just turned 6. We had an epic Frozen birthday party a few weeks ago. It was awesome. And Claire is my 2.5-year-old, and we nickname her Destructo. That is her nickname in our house. And so I wanted to share a story with you this morning about my daughters. It was this Lent, my daughter Maria, she decided that for Lent, she wanted to give up all sweets. And so, I mean, at this point, like, she's 5. She doesn't even have to give up anything for Lent. And so I'm ashamed to say I tried to talk her out of it because I was thinking, like, that's going to be my Lent, is going to be listening to her complain for 40 days, about how she can't have any sweets. But she was just absolutely incredible through the whole 40 days. So at one point during this, Claire, she got an eye infection. And so we went to the doctor. We got these eye drops. And so I had to put these eye drops into Claire's eye 3 times a day. Now, Destructo thought that this was like the apocalypse. Like, every time that I had to put these eye drops, she would be like flailing her arms and screaming, and she'd be like, no, eye drops. That's what she would say over and over. And so it was like this major showdown. So in my effort to get Claire's eye drops, I decided I was going to use some bribery. It's a good parenting skill, okay? And I told her, Claire, after I put the eye drops in, I'm going to let you have a sucker. So immediately I felt really bad. Like, I didn't think it through. Maria has given up sweets for Lent. And so I put Claire's eye drops in her eye, and I give her a sucker, and I'm just kind of waiting to see how it's all going to play out. So my daughter Maria goes over to Claire, and she just takes her wrapper from her, and she walks into the kitchen, and she throws it away. And without me even asking, she comes back in, and she said, Mommy, when I was throwing that wrapper away, I prayed, Jesus, I love you more than lollies. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, she totally taught me in that moment, like, that's what Lent is all about, For us to ask ourselves over and over again, what do we love? Who do we love? What is the priority in our life? And oftentimes, the way that we express what we love is through art. And art comes in many different forms. It can come through what we read, through art, like through drawings, through music, through what we watch, through the media. It's a way that we express ourselves, and it's a way that others express themselves to us that we consume, that we bring into ourselves. And it's something that really transcends words. Art is powerful. And if it wasn't such a big deal, we wouldn't have such a hard time letting go of it, right? There is something big, something transcendent about art. And we really use it to validate our feelings. And if we are feeling happy, or if we want to feel happy, we listen to happy music. If we're sad, and girls, like, if you just want to have like a good cry, we listen to sad music. It validates how we're feeling. If you have experienced a breakup, you might want to listen to some Taylor Swift, right? If you're at a youth conference, we're going to listen to praise and worship. It validates us. It confirms our feelings, and it orients us. And it is powerful. And so the question really becomes, how do you want to be validated? Who do you want to be? How do you want to be oriented? And how do your media choices reflect that? Are they turning you into the person that you want to be? And we live in this time that's really interesting, that we have this whole new form of media that's out there called social media. And what a way to be validated, right? And to look for validation out there. Social media, when it came out about 10 years ago, the initial idea was that it was social, that it was a way for people to connect, to stay in touch with their friends. But it's just a really interesting fact I read the other day. The use of social media has just been exploding throughout all different generations, that we have going on. Everybody's using social media, so the usage has gone up, but the actual interaction has plummeted. So in 2009, about 75% of people either commented or liked the other people's things that they were posting on Facebook. But now, in 2014, really only about 50% of people actually interact in that sort of a way through social media. So what we learn from that, I mean, that is a big drop from 75% to 50%. What we learn from that is that we're using social media in a very different way. We're looking for validation. We want to post things and to try to make ourselves look good and hope that other people will validate us through those things. And it's this really crazy phenomena that's never happened before in the history of mankind, that all of a sudden we're kind of becoming these like mini celebrities. Like everybody has the chance to like have people out there that are following them, that care what's going on in their lives. And that's a really, really great responsibility. And so we have to ask ourselves through that, who do we want to be? Who do we want to be? And what the culture will tell us is that we are supposed to be somebody. And that's the pressure that we have on us through our peer groups, and especially in the media, that we are supposed to be somebody. And so I want to put up this quote. It's from a woman named Norma Jean Mortensen. Here we go. And she says, "To be somebody when you're nobody, you have to be somebody else." And isn't this the message of our culture? Isn't this the message of the media? Isn't this the pressure that we all feel so often? To be somebody when you're nobody, you've got to be somebody else. And this quote really comes to life through the story of Norma Jean Mortensen. So she is a self-proclaimed Cinderella story. She had a very, very broken childhood. She never knew who her father was. Her mother was in and out of mental hospitals. And so during that time, she would jump from living with all of these different relatives. There was one day when her mom showed up when she was living with one of her aunts and actually took her and put her in a duffel bag to take her away from the aunt that she was living with. She was abused in every single definition of abuse, and she felt like she was a nobody. And so when she was a teenager, she was working at a factory, and a magazine came to write an article about the work that they were doing in the factory. So the photographer took her picture, and he told her, that he thought that she had some great potential, and they were actually looking for models at that time. And so he told her, the market that's out there is really for blonde models, though. So Norma Jean immediately dyes her hair blonde, and she goes out to try to make it in the world, to be somebody. And so time goes on, things are kind of starting to escalate, and one thing after another, she's called to change in her life. She had her overbite corrected. Her producers asked her to get a nose job. They also thought that her hair was not quite drastic enough, so she dyed it a platinum blonde. But she also said, if I would have obeyed the rules, I would have never gotten anywhere. She was also making all these different choices in her life to be somebody else in order to find validation, to determine who she was. And so the last thing that she was kind of called to change, that their producers were asking her to change, was her name. They didn't feel like Norma Jean Mortensen had a whole lot of star power. And so, after going through several different options, we can put up the next slide, they decided that they were going to go with the name Marilyn Monroe. So, Marilyn Monroe's plan worked, right? She is a media icon of America. Everybody knows her face. She is like the definition of what's glamour and beautiful in the media, right? And she had everything. She had success. She had validation, she had money, anything that we could ever imagine that the world could offer us. But what she didn't have was joy. And her life led her not to abundant life, but it led to tragedy. She was divorced 3 times in her life. She had multiple affairs with married men. She was addicted to drugs and alcohol, in and out of mental facilities herself. She was fired from several of her movies later on in her life because she was so mentally unstable. And eventually, she died of a drug overdose when she was 36 years old. To be somebody when you're nobody, you've got to be somebody else. And so the question is, who do you want to be? Who do you want to be in social media, in your media choices, in the things that you consume in your life? And how are your media choices going to reflect that? And you might not be Marilyn, but how are you going to be tempted to settle? How are you going to be tempted to change through the things that you are putting in your life? And so I think that that's a really big question when it comes to talking about the media. Because we all know the saying, we are what we eat. And what is the phrase about the media? We consume. We consume the media. And it changes us. Just like if you have all of these friends that are the people that you surround yourself with, and they're all making really bad choices or they're all making really good choices, you're going to eventually start to conform to the people that you're around. So who are the people that you are inviting into your living room through the television shows and the movies that you watch? Are they people who are calling you on in holiness, or are they people who are challenging you to be holy? Who are the people who sing the songs that get stuck in your head? Who are the people that you are following on social media? Are these people who are orienting you towards the Lord? Because that's exactly what the media does. It orients us, and it points us towards something else. That is what art is all about. Expression, pointing us to something else. And things that are true, good, and beautiful, even if they're not directly about God, things that are true, good, and beautiful will elevate us, will elevate our souls to the Lord, to something that is better, that is out there. And so I want to give a couple examples of some media that I love, that I feel does this. And it doesn't mean that this is something that doesn't have any bad stuff in it, but it's something that shows the truth. And so if we could put up the next slide, this is one of my favorite shows, Downton Abbey. Any fans in here? Okay, a couple. The boys are like, I should have gone to the suffering talk. Like, really? I love Downton Abbey, and I'm really, much more into, Jack Bauer and Jason Bourne. I know that that's really weird. And so I was really surprised as I started to watch this show that I really loved it. But I think what really captures me about this show is that there's so many different characters on this show that make terrible choices. Really, really, really bad stuff, right? But what I love about it is that the consequences for these people are very real. They suffer because of the choices that they make. And I feel like it's extremely accurate. It'll go on for years and years, the things that they have done that come back to bite them, really, and that haunt them. And you see how it changes them as a person. And sometimes that's in a really bad way, and sometimes it's in a way that they grow really beautifully. And so there's definitely examples out there of things like that that orient us towards God that aren't even necessarily explicitly about God. As I was preparing for this talk, I posted on my Facebook fan page asking, specifically for songs that do this. And so if we could put up this next slide, there's a couple of things, or different songs, there we go, that people had said, remind them of God's love, or that represent a longing for something more that's out there, that elevates our soul, orients us towards the Lord. And I'm sure that you guys could probably come up with lots of other examples in the same capacity. But on the same token, we have to know that things that are bad, that are evil, that aren't necessarily about the devil, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to bring our soul down. They're going to lower our soul into something else. And we can't think that these things don't affect us. And I heard this analogy before, which I think is really, really powerful to illustrate this. So, I'm from Texas, and what they say in Texas, everything's bigger in Texas. So the biggest place that I have experienced this since I moved there is in the bugs, okay? The bugs in Texas are really big, and they're absolutely disgusting. And so I really can't handle it. So we have a lot of cockroaches in Texas. And also another thing that I wasn't really expecting is that there's rats. I actually had a rat come when I was pregnant. I had all these like snacks in my office when I was a youth minister, and a rat came in the middle of the night and tore apart all of my stuff and ate all my pregnant snacks. Okay, it was like a horrible day at the office. So these are some problems that we have in Texas. I love Texas. This is just one maybe problem with Texas. So this analogy that I heard before, is imagine that you decided that you were going to stop cleaning your house. You were never going to take out the trash again. You're never going to wash another dish. You're just going to leave your pizza boxes out and just allow the garbage to fill up your home. It's not going to be long before the rats and the cockroaches start to show up. That's what we're looking for, and in a very, very real way, if we live this lifestyle, we're inviting the cockroaches and the rats into our home. In a very real way, if we are filling ourselves with trash, we are inviting the devil, and we can't be surprised when he shows up. We are allowing him to come into our hearts and into our lives, and we are inviting him in. Now, one of my favorite saints is Saint Don Bosco. And he was, in the 1800s, he opened this place in Turin, Italy, where he brought in young men and allowed them to come and live with him. And he would take them off the streets, teach them all about the catechism, about the love of God. And they were basically like these hoodlums that he would bring in that were wreaking havoc all over the whole town. And soon he had hundreds and hundreds of boys that were living in his oratory. So the amazing thing was that he made the faith so attractive, and the culture that they had there was, they said there was like, holiness was the air that you breathed. And these boys who were hoodlums, all of a sudden were saints. And there's been canonized saints that were boys that lived in Don Bosco's oratory. It was this incredible, incredible place where the Lord was moving in these boys' hearts and bringing them to sainthood. Now, Don Bosco could put up with pretty much anything, but he had two things that he had no tolerance for whatsoever. Because he said, if you're engaging in these things, there's nothing I can do for you. Because their voice is going to be so much louder than what I could do for you, what I could speak to you. And so the first of these was bad company, bad friends. And he would give them one warning, and if they would not be able to sever ties with the friends that were bringing them down, then Don Bosco would have to ask them to leave. And the second thing was bad media. Bad media. And so imagine this is the 1800s, okay? So this is like books, right? Bad books. But Don Bosco understood the power of the media choices of these boys. And so our question becomes, would Don Bosco kick us out of our own homes? And we are called to recognize our homes as the domestic church, but we're also called to recognize ourselves as a temple of the Holy Spirit. This is what the scriptures say, that we are the dwelling place for the Holy Spirit. What are we bringing into that dwelling place? Who are we inviting in? Is it true, good, and beautiful, or is it harming our temple? And he uses this analogy of a gargoyle. And we all, I think I have an image of it that we could put up there. If you're not familiar with gargoylage, there we go. It's a really gross looking guy. So, when we see in Europe in these big cathedrals, what they would do is they would put these gargoyles on the outside because they were supposed to scare the evil away from the church. But they were also a symbol that the evil is on the outside, but when you come inside, you're safe. That when you come inside, that's where God is dwelling. And this is our image for ourselves as the temple of the Holy Spirit. That the evil should stay on the outside, and that on the inside we find God's love, and we find safety and sanctity on the inside. And you might say like, okay, Katie, but this one media choice that I have, it's just like a little bad, right? It's mostly good, but there's just like that little one part, or that one lyric, or that one scene, or that one character on the TV show, or whatever it may be. It's just a little bad. Now, kind of going along with the same idea of the rats and the roaches, if you decide that you want to get rid of a rat that's inside your home or your building, what you do is you put out rat poison. And rat poison is 95% food. 95% good, something that is needed in order to live, that you have to have. Good, but 5% arsenic. It's just a little bit bad. And that little bit kills. It kills. And so we have to ask ourselves, who do we want to be and how far are we willing to go? And what I'm not saying here today is that you can only listen to Christian music, and that's it. And that you can only watch EWTN or only watch shows that are about God and things like that. But what I am saying is that we should look to St. Paul, who says in 1 Thessalonians, he says, test everything. Test everything, retain what is good, and refrain from every kind of evil. Test everything and retain what is good, and refrain from every kind of evil. It's like the most practical way that we can approach the media. And my brothers and sisters, we have to do this all the time. Test everything. Be on guard all the time. And the reason for this is because media is shoved down our throats all day, every day. Really, the only way to escape it is to go and live in a cave, all right? And I'm not suggesting that we should do that. But what we should do is to be on guard at all time and be testing everything in our lives. I was looking up, just kind of see how prevalent this is in our life. And the average person checks their cell phone 150 times a day. 150 times a day, we take out that phone and we look at it. So that equates to about 58 minutes that we spend looking at our phone over the course of the day. Now, this factors into 42 hours a week that the average person is in front of some kind of a screen, whether that's your phone, your computer, whether it's homework time or time that you're just screwing around, watching TV. 42 hours a week we spend looking at a screen. That is a full-time job that we have looking at a screen. 16 hours a week are spent listening to music. This is a huge part of our lives. And we have to know that it's affecting us, that it's changing us. And I want to share this video clip. It's really entertaining, but also really insightful about the way that the internet specifically is changing our brains and how we need to be on guard for that. So if we could go ahead and put that up.
So you're reading an article online when you get an instant message with a link to a funny photo, which of course you have to share. And now you're reading your Facebook news wall, which sends you to a video of a panda bear attacking a kid. And now you're reading Wikipedia to learn everything you can about the violent behavior of panda bears. And this is what 3 minutes on the internet can be like. We live like this all the time, and it has to have some kind of effect on us.
The net is making us more superficial as thinkers.
That is Nicholas Carr. He is the author of The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. To understand this whole thing better, we need to go way back in time, to say, like, the prehistoric age.
You wanted to know everything going on around you, because the more you knew about your surroundings, the less likely you were to get attacked by a predator. And there's even evidence that our brains release some dopamine, pleasure-producing neurotransmitter chemical, to reward us for seeking out and finding new information.
So getting distracted felt good and helped us stay alive. But the problem is that nowadays, predators aren't much of an issue, but we still have the same brains. And also, there's the internet, which is...
It's an incredibly information-rich environment that the net creates for us, and that's why we use it so much. I mean, sounds, pictures, words, text. And what this tends to do is promote a sort of compulsive behavior in which we're constantly checking our smartphone, constantly glancing at our email inbox. We're kind of living in this perpetual state of distraction and interruption.
Which is dangerous because...
that mode of thinking crowds out the more contemplative, calmer modes of thinking.
And that focused, calm thinking is actually how we learn. It's a process called memory consolidation.
And that means the transfer of information from our short-term working memory to our long-term memory. And it's through moving information from your working memory to your long-term memory that you create connections between that information and everything else you know.
So you've got this awesome life-changing piece of information in your short-term memory, but then you hear that email ding and poof, there it goes. That email takes its place and you never get a chance to learn anything, all because of one distraction.
So attention is the key, and if we lose control of our attention or are constantly dividing our attention, then we don't really enjoy that consolidation process.
But I can hear it now. Someone out there is saying, what does learning matter if all the information in the world is just a Google search away? Well,
that is kind of shortchanging our intellects. If that's the way you're using your mind, just kind of searching very quickly and finding information and then forgetting it very quickly, you're never building knowledge. You're kind of thinking like a computer.
Which means that our very humanity is at stake. And it would be a shame if we all got assimilated because, well, humanity is pretty neat.
I really believe that if you look at the great monuments of culture, they come from people who are able to pay attention, who control their mind. That's what allows us to think in the highest terms, and think conceptually, think critically, think in some very creative ways.
And it's this kind of thinking that's at risk, being eroded one cute cat video at a time. Don't get us wrong, the internet is good for lots of things, and it should be celebrated. But the best thing we can do for our minds is to find some time every day to unplug, calm down, and focus on one thing at a time. Your email and those cats will be here when you get back.
Awesome. And I love this. I'm sure you can clap. The people aren't here that made it to appreciate your clapping. But I love this video because I feel like I relate so much to this. Like, I have noticed my inability to concentrate, and especially through prayer. Like, my opportunities to sit and to be quiet and to listen to the Lord, I've found that it's a lot harder. And I'm guessing that maybe you can relate to this. That when we have all of these constant distractions in our lives, filling up our brains, that it is so much harder to turn it off when it becomes a part of who we are. And what I would hear so often when I was a youth minister from teens is they would say, you know, the biggest impediment, the hardest part about their life walking with the Lord was that they were so busy. And there's this great quote, if we could put that up on the screen. It says, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. We fill ourselves with so many things. We make time for Instagram. We make time for Netflix. We make time for all of these different things in our life. And if we don't make a conscious effort to make time for prayer, we simply won't do it. It won't happen. And a personal story, just about 6 months ago, my sister-in-law and I were talking about this very thing, about how our lives are full of so many things, and basically, like, our prayer life was just really, really suffering. And so after we had this great conversation, I was at home and I was like, Lord, like, I have to do better. I have to do better in my life. And so as I was thinking about it and really kind of taking it to prayer, like, what do I need to do to make this happen? You know, I started thinking, you know, I don't have a job, and so we're called to tithe and to give of ourselves, but I don't have any money, you know, so what is it that I do have? And I realized that I had very little of it, but I had time. And they say how you spend your time is how you spend yourself. And that's what I felt like God was really saying, like, Katie, I want you. That's what I want. And so having 2 small children, like, my house is just crazy all the time. And the only time that I get to myself during the day is nap time. And it is like the most sacred 2 hours of my entire day. And so I felt like God was asking me to tithe my nap time. Like, give me the first fruits, the very beginning. Give me 10% of nap time. And at first I was like, no, Lord, it's nap time. It's my favorite part of the day. But, you know, I decided that I was going to give it a shot. And so 10% of 2 hours is 12 minutes. It's like not a big deal at all. So I come out from laying my kids down every day, and there's like laundry to be folded, and I need to start dinner, and I have work that I need to do, and all of these different things that I have to do. But before I do anything, I sit down on my couch, I set the timer for 12 minutes, and I open up my Bible. And sometimes I'll journal, sometimes I'll just read, sometimes I'll pray the rosary, whatever it is. And about 99% of the time, my timer goes off, and I'm like, Lord, I'm not done. I'm not done. This has been such an incredibly blessed time. And I can tell you, it has been transforming for me. And it's so simple. It's such a simple thing. But I had to get really, really practical about what I was going to do, when I was going to do it, and how I was going to make sure that I was held accountable to unplug, to turn everything else off in my life, and to just focus on the Lord. And so I want to give you a challenge to find a certain time of your day that is absolutely media-free. And this might be for prayer, but it also might be, for an hour in the evening when you're just being present to your family or being present to whatever you need to do. And if that idea makes you really uncomfortable, that's like red flag. Like, this is usually when we feel uncomfortable about something like that, that's when the Lord's like, that's me, making you feel a little uncomfortable. But to have some time during your day that you unplug and that you are present to the moment. Because we want to hear the voice of God. There's this cartoon we're going to put up on the screen that I think is so accurate. And this is what I would hear from teens all the time. I don't feel like I hear God. I'm asking him to speak to me. But how can we hear God's voice when we have so many different distractions going on around us in our lives? How can we hear his call? We share the story that we've all heard of when Jesus calls the apostles. He calls the apostles in the midst of their day-to-day life. Here they are, they're fishermen, they're working on their nets, they're on the beach, and all of a sudden this man comes up who they've never seen before. They don't know anything about him. And he says 3 words, "Come, follow me." Come, follow me. And suddenly their hearts were set on fire in a way that their bones could hardly contain. And their hearts knew that they had found what they had been looking for, waiting for, the face of Christ, this encounter. And immediately, the apostles left their nets, they left their families, they left everything that they had ever known to follow this Jesus. And so we ask ourselves, when we hear God's voice calling, when we give him that opportunity, what are we willing to let go of? What are we willing to leave behind? Because the key for the apostles was that they focused not on the no, not on what they were leaving behind, but on the invitation, on the face of God, on the greatest opportunity, the greatest call that humanity has ever seen, to come and follow me. And that was a yes. When my husband asked me to marry him and I said yes, that was an implied no to every other man on the face of the planet. But I didn't think about that in that moment. All I thought about was my yes. And when we say yes to Christ, that's an implied no to certain things. And I'm guessing that you probably know what those things are in your heart, particularly in the call to the media. What are the things that are lowering your soul, that are not challenging you in holiness, but challenging you to be holy? Is it certain songs, certain music? I'm guessing that Miley and Katy Perry probably aren't elevating your soul to the Lord. Is it certain TV shows or movies? Because I'm also guessing that Zac Efron and Vanessa Hudgens are not forming your vision of your future spouse, Is it certain TV shows? What is it in your life that God is calling you to say, love me more? Just like I told you in the story earlier about my daughter, what is it that God's saying, will you just love me more? Because I promise you that God will never be outdone in generosity. So I want to give you a really practical second challenge for you this afternoon. And I would do this so often with my teenagers when we would do a big retreat. It's called the 30-day challenge. For 30 days, I want to challenge you, and you don't have to do this, but if it's something that God is calling you to do, I hope that you will say yes. For 30 days, that you only listen to Christian music and that you don't watch R-rated movies. just to see. I mean, it's 30 days. It's not really that big of a deal, right? But just to see what it does in your life, to see how you are transformed, and to give God the opportunity to speak to you, to say yes, as he says to you, will you love me more? Because this God that came and called the apostles is calling you. He wants to be the one to validate your feelings. He wants to be the one to orient you in your daily life. And he wants to be the one to show you that you don't have to be somebody else, but that you are somebody. That you are somebody worth dying for.